Hey Josh,
Hey, Robert.
what season is it? Methinks it's football season.
It is football season. And many, many seasons ago, you and I did an episode. We even spoke at a conference about the parallels between football. And at that time, our focus was agile. So we are revisiting it. This time, we'll hit some agile stuff, but also more on leadership. So parallels to the world of football. It is Sunday evening. There are lots of football games going on right now. I watched a handful
There are.
today. Yeah,
The Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Baltimore Ravens, if you were
they did.
watching.
They did. It
But they
was.
squeaked. They squeaked by.
That happens. The Steelers tend to that's how the Steelers win. So yeah. So we are going to talk about lessons that you as a leader out there watching and or listening can take from the wonderful world of American football. I'll make sure we clarify that. The number one thing, I've got an ordered list here, Bob,
Okay.
from the home office in Sioux City, Iowa. If you get that reference.
I don't get that reference, but I'm on
Okay.
board. I'm
It
on the
was the
train
old
with
David
you.
Letterman thing. He always would get the top 10 lists
No.
from the home. Oh, okay, fine. So the number one thing is that in leadership and in football, doing small things right wins. Doing the fundamentals right every time wins. That's something that I think too many people overlook, and they look for these large, grandiose things that I should be doing to become this great leader. No, just do the routine things routinely well. Some of the routine things are hard and require practice, which is why in the world of football, the pros still practice the fundamentals every day because that stuff is hard and maintaining it. And they know that doing that well, play in and play out, week in and week out, that's what wins. And the same thing lives in the leadership world. So having good one-on-one meetings, just the basics of that, just doing that well on a consistent basis, being intentional with that is going to make a huge difference. So there's a handful of things like that, Bob. I want to put that out there, see if there's any things that you can think of that are just like the fundamentals of leadership that unfortunately a lot of people just kind of bail out on. And if they were to do that, that would help them be more effective as leaders. So that's, to me, one of the most important things of just do the routine, make it routine.
I mean, I don't know if we need to make a list, but we could say things like listening, things like providing feedback, things like not just being too negative, also seeing not just nitpicking, right, and seeing like the the issues, but seeing also the successes, being even-handed with leadership, leading from yourself, being a role model as a leader. So before you lead outward, lead inward. And I don't know if all football coaches are examples of that. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. Back to the Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin is a coach that I admire, that he sort of wears himself on his sleeve. You know, if you're not doing it, he's going to call you out. He's going to call himself out. He's sort of this ultra straight shooter. You know more about, sort of the coaches than I do, so I'm just observing. But I do agree with you that the basics, years ago, someone asked me to do like an advanced product owner class. And I went to New Hampshire to put this advanced product owner class. You know, it was like Product Owner 2.0 or Product Owner Mastery. And when I put it together, I couldn't figure out what next level product ownership was. And it's the same thing with leadership. I teach a leadership class, and folks are like, "I'm a leader. Give me like." Give me the the next level. I want to be the next level. And when I remember starkly when I delivered this class, people were like disappointed. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I really think that being an outstanding PO goes back to doing the basics well. And I believe that before I delivered the class, and I believe that now. You may not like that answer, but it really is. I think advanced sort of operational dynamics are related to the basics, and I think that's true of anything you do.
Yeah, one of the most stark examples of this that I saw in the world of football was Rex Ryan. So Rex Ryan is one of the better defensive coaches ever. He was okay as a head coach, but as a defensive coordinator, he was amazing. So I had the opportunity my second year. I was hurt, so I was an offensive player, so I was on the scout team helping the defense practice every day because I was hurt, so I wasn't going to play. So I was a tackling dummy, and every day they spent the first 45 minutes on the fundamentals, on tackling, on not only when you tackle but doing it well. Also, when you tackle, this is how you strip the ball and create a fumble. And those were things that they did every day. And we transformed from a defense then ranked in the bottom half of the country to a defense ranked in the top 10. And our players didn't change, but it was a focus on the fundamentals that Rex and his coaches brought, where we're going to do these things well. We are going to have this defensive game plan where we're doing all these different things. We're going to do a handful of things. We're going to do them better than anybody. And we're going to practice to make sure that we do that. And so that's what they did. And I saw that. So I started to apply that in the rest of my life, just as I realized that that was a difference maker. And so when I did that and started to apply that in just the simple things of leading and doing my job and all of that, then it translated the same way. So little story to bridge that gap. Item number 2.
Could I add just a real quick note to one?
Please do.
It's consistency.
Yeah.
It's so practice. I just wanted to say that word, everyone. It's practice. It's the little things, but being consistent. Like, blocking, getting to the point where you're blocking consistently, but getting to the point where you're giving feedback consistently. Like, you're not just giving it to the high performers, you're giving it to the low or the middle performers, whatever performers. You're giving it to everyone. You're being consistent. Even your stars are getting the same level of feedback that your average performers are. And I'm just talking about feedback. So you're real consistent. You may fluctuate every once in a while, but man, you're delivering it. Folks can count on your leadership. They can count on you doing the little thing.
Yeah, a nice cliche that I've heard a bunch of times is what separates the people that are good at their job to the ones that are great. And in the sports world, this makes a lot more sense. We're trying to bring the parallel here is that the average folks practice until they can do it right. The great folks practice until they can never get it wrong. So that's the consistency that Bob talked about, of just doing it over and over again, where you just get exceptional at it. And every time you do it, it's effective. Every time you have a one-on-one, it makes a difference. Every time you receive the feedback, every time you need to be listening, you're doing it well. All those things that we've talked about over the past 6-7 months, as we've talked about some of the leadership things that people could and should be doing that every day and being focused on getting better at it and practicing it to where you always do it well. That takes a lot of effort. Okay, so number 2 is expectations and making them clear equals an empowered team. There are lots of folks that strive to create an empowered team, but the problem that their team has is they aren't fully aware, they aren't clear on what the expectations of greatness looks like. So as I've looked at and paid attention to in my working world, but also the folks that Bob has mentioned, they're really exceptional coaches. The one thing that separates their teams and their coaching style is everybody is perfectly clear on what the expectation and the standard is. So Mike Tomlin, going back to that, there's a thing that he always says that the standard is the standard. And he makes sure that everybody understands in the Pittsburgh Steelers realm, this is the standard of how we operate. And there is no guesswork as to what that is. It is crystal clear. And when people have that understanding and they have that knowledge, they are then empowered because they know what's being asked of them and they can find ways to deliver on that. But step 1 is making sure that your team knows what expectations of greatness looks like. And unfortunately, in the technology leadership realm where we spend all our time, that's so rare. And that's what has led to some of the challenges that we've tried to tackle with this podcast and video series, is just helping people get better at being great leaders. And just making expectations clear is a huge thing.
It goes back to that consistency thing is the thing that came to my mind again, expectations of everyone. Right. I do think you probably set different expectations for the team leader, like the quarterback, slightly different. But I do think there's this like sort of the Steelers, I'll use them as the metaphor, right? Like there's a culture in the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's decades old. Mike Tomlin inherited the culture. Now he probably recreated it to some degree, but there's a cultural standard there. Now that's not to say that it applies exactly equally to everyone. There's probably a little bit of modification that's going on, but there's a consistency to it. You're a Steeler or you're not, right? And I think this is leaders setting the tone. And it starts with holding yourself to the tone. I might add that, right? It's not so again, it goes back to walking your talk, I think. Too many leaders, I think they say things, but then they're not doing it themselves. And so I know we've harped on this over the Metacast over the years, but it is that inside out job. So the standard starts with you and not espousing it. Are you walking the standard? Are you talking the standard? Are you living the standard? Like work ethic. Are you showing up? Are you showing up early? Are you leaving late? I know that's an arbitrary sort of example, but it's an example of are you walking the standard?
Yeah, I was just coaching someone middle of the week last week about leadership and some of the how just life changes when you're in a leadership role, whether you ask for it or not. But the reality is that everything you do, there are lots of eyes watching. So whenever you're in a leadership role, everything you do is going to start to set the tone. And so we talked about the small things, and now the small things really matter because everybody's watching you and everybody's seeing how you handle these small things that come up. And that either strengthens the culture or creates a crack that if you continue to not execute well or not set the standard with those small things, then everybody starts to realize, oh, okay, so that stuff really doesn't matter. Sure, yeah, we talk about it, we do all this stuff, we say these nice words when it matters, but when the rubber meets the road and somebody has to make a decision, we're just gonna, those are just words. As a leader, you can't do that. You have to do it right every time because as soon as you stop doing it right, then you set clear expectations for your organization and your team that thing that we talked about doesn't really matter. So it's okay if you don't, you know, do everything that we're trying to do to make sure that we're winning in market or we're building the best product, we're hiring the best people, all of those things. It's okay if we slack off on some of this stuff. And every time you do that, you lessen the strength of your culture and your team. Okay. Number 3, this goes back to the very first episode of the Metacast that we did a decade plus ago. First episode that we ever did was on trust. And for really great football teams to be good, there has to be a very high level of trust. And when I talk about that, think about a play. So if I'm lined up next to Bob and I trust that Bob's going to do his job, then I can focus on doing my job. There have been times in my playing career and maybe in the podcast when I've been worried about, hey, maybe this guy next to me isn't going to get his job done. So I need to help out. That sounds good, but in the end, when I try and help somebody out, I'm not as effective at my job. So getting to a space where you've done it enough, you've practiced enough, you've had that clarity, you understand what greatness looks like, that I know Bob's going to do the job every time. So I can focus on doing my job, which is already hard enough. You try and do your job and somebody else's job, and that's impossible. But knowing that that's handled. So when I think about hiring members as a part of my team, one of the things that I want to be in a space is that I know that I can take that piece of my brain out. Say I'm hiring a product manager. I want to know that I can take the product management part of my brain, put it on a shelf, because I know Kevin has it. Hey, I've hired Kevin. Kevin's a great product manager. I don't even have to think about it anymore because I know that he's got that covered. So I can focus on these things. When that trust isn't there, people try and compensate, and then everybody's struggling to do their job and somebody else's. And that's when quarterbacks get sacked or the offensive team that you're playing against on defense breaks a long run, or there's a long pass, there's some broken coverage or something like that, because everybody's worried about everything else instead of just doing their job.
I would say part of trust is not, it's like extending it to the point where I'm not going to be perfect. So Josh has to give me the ball. And if I screw it up, then I screw it up. He shouldn't use that. Oh, Bob blew it, so now I have to. So trust to me, it's sort of it's permanent or it's extended or it's resilient. You have to give it to someone. And if Josh starts coming in and interrupting me, or covering for me, well, then I actually start pulling back. I would probably start pulling back as Josh got it, right, or whatever. So then it screws up the dynamic. It screws up the accountability. It screws up the focus. And now Josh isn't doing. He's worried about doing two jobs, and I sort of step back. So I think it's persistent trust. You want to, if someone has it, until you kick them off the team,
Mhm.
and until they're gone or until they go to the practice squad or something. But you trust them and you hold them accountable to that, and you don't expect perfectionism. Maybe unless you're delivering. Trust me, I was watching football today. There ain't no perfection.
Right.
There's not. There's a lot of big men that are working and real strong, but they all make mistakes. So and you can see that.
Yeah, and our world is equally difficult. Building software products, delivering them effectively in a market, just building them so they're maintainable and scalable. That's hard enough. That complexity is just massive. Then you start interfacing with customers and the challenges that they're going to push on your product and the direction you have and all of that stuff. No one's going to get it right. But I know that, hey, we're going to screw up. That's okay. But I know that whoever was at fault or whoever fumbled the ball, they are probably more frustrated than anybody else. The fact that they dropped the ball. So knowing that and knowing that, hey, that person's going to fix it. They're going to get it right the next time. They've already gotten it right dozens, if not hundreds of times. So this is just the one time where like they fumbled. And so that's why you talk about the world of agile, where you iterate and you work on, if you're going to fail, you're going to fail small. You're going to have these massive failures. Let's iterate often and check ourselves along the way and make sure that if we are off course, we have time to read and react. And so that's a huge thing that our space is able to handle. That, again, unfortunately, not a lot of people are able to do or choose not to do because it is harder to operate within that manner.
Absolutely. You said something, Josh, I want to amplify. It's the Bill Belichick, I think, culture was do your job.
Yeah.
And so leaders, do your job. Too often we're doing other people's job. Like so micromanagement is by definition doing other people's job. Right. And then part of do your job is focus on doing your job, not complaining about other people. Like I see so many leaders, they're micromanaging people, they're ranking on people, they're backbiting to people. Damn it. There's goodness in you focusing on being the best leader that you can be, and focus on doing what you do.
Yep. Okay, moving on to the next one. This is a big word. I hope I get it out all in one try, Bob. So the opportunity for you to jump in and take a jab at me is at hand. Feedback is ubiquitous.
Whoa!
Got it.
Whoa! You
Yes.
nailed it.
Yeah. In the world of high level sports, everything you do is scrutinized by you, by your coach, by your coach's boss, by the athletic director, by the fans, by everything that goes into it. So there is a consistent level of feedback. Not all feedback is good. Not all feedback is healthy, but that's just part of the job. And the best players are the ones that can receive the feedback well and choose to use it effectively for them to learn and grow. So number one, as a leader, create a culture where feedback is the norm. Don't have it be a situation where, this might hit some people in some difficult spots. Maybe the only time someone gets a feedback is the annual review. And that's the first time they've heard that they've been struggling for the past 6 months and they're just hearing it now. That's not fair. That's being a crappy leader. So feedback needs to be a continuous, constant cycle so that people can make the adjustments in near real time. Otherwise, number one, if you don't know you're doing something wrong, how can you be expected to fix it?
I mean, I would say too. Well, first on football, I was watching the games today, and a guy throws an interception. And, he kicks the turf, he throws his helmet, but then he goes over and they have these like iPads or Microsoft
Yeah.
pads. And they're immediately, I mean, like within a minute of the mistake, they're looking at it, and someone and coaches there pointing it out, and they're talking about it. So there's this immediate. I mean, there's video, there's videotapes of practices and things like that. But imagine a place where your failure, your immediate public failure, is shoved. Your nose is shoved in it, and it's not in this, penalized way. It's like, what do we do in real time the next time to correct it? And what can you do and get over it? There's another part of that feedback is forgetting. I think they talk about having a short memory in
Right.
sports, right? Because you're always going to be failing. You can't always be successful, but having that short memory so you don't let a failure or a mistake carry on too long and you clean up yourself. So that's one thing. It's really imagine a world in leadership where we're that real time and we're having that culture of feedback is a blessing. Feedback is for learning. Feedback is for improvement. The other thing that Josh didn't say is you need to get feedback too as a leader. So forget about shut up about the team, shut up about the Microsoft iPads for the team. I wish the first iPad was where you're looking at your own mistakes as a leader. You need to create an environment where you're getting the feedback and where you're reacting to it constructively. And you're apologizing and you're saying, I need to get better, etc. Coaches, football coaches, I wrote down some notes for myself, like end game management. Some coaches really stink at time management at the end of the games. And here the team plays like 60 minutes or 55 minutes. And then the last 2 minutes either makes it or breaks it. And that's the coach's territory. And some coaches sort of don't own up to that. They like deflect it. You can see it in the post game reviews. And I think coaches with integrity own that. It's like, I own that. I need to get better. I'm going to study that. I'm going to do something about that. So there's this sort of, do you take the feedback or do you deflect it? And that's a role model for your teams. So I think your feedback skill starts with how do you take, not how do you give it, but how do you take it and receive it and act on it.
Yeah, cultural norm in the sports world is the most important play is the next play. No other plays matter. So it is developing that short memory, but also establishing new memories of the mistakes that you made so that when you get that next chance, you've learned and grown. And so it's what can I take from what just happened and make the next play the best play I've ever had. And so one of the things that we're talking about is whoever your favorite team is, you can look at their record, you can do all that stuff. But if you look at the teams that are consistently good, I guarantee you all of the coaches are doing the things that we're talking about. All of the really, really great teams that are out there, college, pro, whatever it is, that are consistently good, they are doing all of these things. So if you're listening and you're kind of sad because maybe the coach for your favorite team isn't owning up to things, isn't the first one to say that when a team loses, hey, it's on me. I have to do a better job. These are the things I should have done. These are the things I'm going to fix. This is what we're going to do next week to fix the problem. The really great coaches say things like that. Unfortunately, one team I care about very much, they've had a few losses, and the coach has said the opposite of that. And it's a statement about where the players screwed up. And that makes me sad as someone that cares about leadership, and that person is the leader of the team I care about very much. It makes me frustrated. So I get a little upset, but that's okay. But when I look, and there are really great examples of leaders doing that, and those are the teams that consistently win. Okay. Let's go back to one of our first football and agile things. Game day is your sprint review, your sprint demo.
I remember this one.
Yeah, this is a classic because that's when it's time for your team to roll out, and you're sitting on the sidelines as a leader. They are up there standing in front of hopefully the rest of your company, demoing everything that they've done, and you're coaching throughout the week and the previous weeks, the previous months. All of those things have led up to that moment where the lights are on, the camera's on, and one of the things that folks say is you can never hide from the eye in the sky. So that's a theory about the camera that watches everything, and the feedback and everything is scrutinized. So the same thing is true with your sprint review, sprint demo, whatever you call it. That's when your team has the opportunity to go out on the field and show off and show what they've done. And at that point, there's nothing you can do as a coach, as a leader. What happened over the previous couple of weeks happened. And there's nothing you could do about it. Those are out on the field are doing those things. So think about it like that and think about, okay, how did that go? Did that go as well as we would like? If not, what are the things that we have to do? What are the fundamentals that we have to change along the way that will help us get better, so that the next time we have the opportunity to step out there on game day and show off what we've done, we're better, just a little bit better. That's how you need to think about it.
I like that notion of the alignment between the sprints or the delivery, the execution, and that alignment to game day to execution results. And it's up to the coaches, like we were saying last time, they'll own performance or lack of performance. But they also realize, I think, Josh, that the game day is for the players. Really is about how did we prepare, and it's players' execution. So there's a stepping back, giving the players the stage, almost being a supporting. I think of the leader as being a leader. When the lights are on, the leader steps back. And I like that notion. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. When the lights are off, the leader's there. The coach is in there in the game. But they're stepping back and letting the players shine. And I like that idea of it as well.
Yeah, on game day, the reality is there's not a whole lot more you can do to adjust the outcome. The work you've put in the previous week in the practices. So think about in the world of software dev, the work you've done over the previous week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever your sprint length is, the work you've put in to do that, the little things, the fundamentals, the leadership along the way, the standard that you've created, the culture that you've built, that capability to execute throughout the entire sprint is the thing that separates you and creates your team's capability to deliver and deliver well. So at that point, when the sprint demo shows up, what happened is what happened, and you're going to show off how it went, and that's about the best you can do. Okay.
I have a cat, Josh, that suddenly loves me for whatever reason, and it's looking for me to pet him.
So that's that noise in the background? So it's not the new puppy? Because there's a new puppy in the Galen household for all of you that are listening here.
But he's in a container. There was no way I was going to let him loose.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So the last one for me just kind of builds on top of all of this. And it really is that the teams that win, and we've talked about this a little bit throughout the episode, the teams that win are the teams that have a great culture. And the teams that have a great culture have a consistent and continual layer of strong leaders. So when I think about what makes great teams, it's a great owner who hires a great GM, who that GM then knows how to hire coaches. That coaches knows how to hire more coaches. Those coaches know how to find the best players. Those players know how to work with each other well. They know how to recruit other players and do all of that. So it's this cascading view of great leaders. And one of the things, I'm part of a new company, and one of the things we've talked about is we as executives, if we all just hire 4 amazing people and that continues to cascade down, if we focus on doing that, we have a really great opportunity to be something special. So it's that same thing, is that great teams are built on great leaders, and that comes with intentional hiring, knowing, we go back to item number 2, which is the expectations of what greatness looks like, knowing what that is, so that when you're hiring that, you can have a discussion with the candidates, so you can build that, you can vet that, you can understand that, they get excited about being a part of that. So that all builds on top of each other. And that's how great teams are built, whether it's football, soccer, software, marketing, whatever it is.
Right.
That is just how teams win.
Things I've heard lately. So I'm not a big fan, or I haven't been a big fan of Deion Sanders for whatever reason. He's a little bit of a showboat, and that bugs me. But then something has clicked lately. He's been successful. He's turning Colorado around. And then someone was talking about him going to the Dallas Cowboys and replacing Mike McCarthy there because he's doing so bad. And they were talking about One, he was a Dallas Cowboy for some period of time, but they were talking about his attraction. One, as a leader, he could lead in the locker room. He
Mm.
could gain the respect as a leader, but then people want to work for him. And like in Colorado, he has some world class coaches that have gone to college. And I didn't realize this, but he's drawing leaders. To your point, Josh, he's drawing leaders in. So it's not all of the Dion show. So he's doing what, like the basics you were talking about. He really is hammering on the basics of Colorado, and that's what's turning it around. He's also surrounded himself with great people, and they're surrounding themselves with great people than great players, and that's what it's about, and that I respect. So the showboat side I don't, but this fact that he really understands effective leadership. So under the covers, under the facade of showboatism, there's a really solid leader there. You probably knew this way longer than I did. And I'm like, then I honor that. And it's exactly the point you're making. And I think in software teams, we really want to do that. Are leaders compounding the leadership as it goes down into the teams? It's not just the management role leaders. It's not just do you have the title in the org chart? That's part of it. But also, are you building leadership? Are you role modeling leadership in the organization?
Yeah, the really great coaches that I've had the opportunity to work with, a handful of them now are head coaches in the NFL or SEC teams or things like that. And so what I saw is the things that Dion does well is because Dion has been around great coaching. He's been a part of great teams. He's had the opportunity to see what creates those types of organizations and teams and just like cultures is that it it starts at the top. We talked about as a leader, everybody's watching the things that you do, and those coaches know whether the team's made up 100 guys, 120 guys, whatever the number is. Every time they walk into a meeting room, every time that head coach steps out on the practice field, any field, everybody's watching them and they are setting the tone. So they are doing the small things right every time. And I guarantee the leaders that are on their team, the other coaches, the captains, whoever it is within their team that are leaders, they're doing things right every time. And you know what? Everybody knows what good looks like. That's a consistent thing, right? Talk about the Steelers. I go back to the Steelers as a Steelers fan. They do a really good job. Mike Tomlin does a really good job of, number one, defining the standard and saying things like the standard is the standard. Like, gentlemen, the standard is the standard. That's how it is, and it's a standard. That means we never deviate. This is what we do. If you're going to be a Steeler, this is how things roll. So in the world that you are working, if you were going to work at your company, so say Bob and I have a company, the way that we would roll is, hey, if you're going to work at our company, this is the standard. This is how
Right.
we work. And if you choose that you don't want to work like that, that's fine. But then you can't be a part of our team. You can't be a part of our organization. But if you believe in that, you support that, you want to be a part of that, you want to help create that, this is the place for you. And so that's what Dion has created. Is Dion has created the standard in Colorado. This is who we are. This is how
Yep.
we're going to operate. The first year was difficult because he was standing everything up new. Now you see the second year, he's doing a lot better because the coaches have been there. They've had a chance to establish. They've had a chance to figure out just like if, Bob and I have been hired into companies and we are now coming in as leaders and we're fundamentally changing the way that we're asking people in that organization to work. Dion was doing the same thing with the existing players. He was fundamentally changing the expectations of this is what it means to play at this school. And that first year, people are going to figure out whether they want to be a part of that. Everybody, hey, yeah, sure, that sounds good. But then you get to the reality and the difficulty of operating at that standard. And that's where things get difficult and people choose to opt in or opt out. So that's why, for those of you that pay attention, the transfer portal for Colorado was massive. A ton of people left, a ton of people came in. But this second year is better because that culture's had a chance to gain ground and to grow roots and really strengthen. And so that's what's happened there.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn my camera off real quick
Okay.
because I'm out of sync a little bit. I was 2 seconds out of sync.
Man.
But I have three other things. I think you hit your six, right?
Yeah, I did.
I have three quick. It's not three. It's one set of ideas that I wanted to just that came to me as we were talking. One is calmness under pressure. Some coaches, and I'm separating this from angry coaches. Most coaches get angry on the, particularly at officials on the sidelines. But there's coaches that I think are really calm when the stuff is hitting the fan, and it makes them better leaders. They're not, the team members are not calming them down. They're calming the team members down. So I think that's a good attribute to have. Another one that I've noticed is generational adjustments. With the portal, I don't understand the portal that well, but it's there's now a lot of competition from team to team.
Mhm.
And I think the coaches that are being more successful, again, it comes back to what I've heard of Dion. He connects with multi-generational players, and he's adaptive, and he's putting the players first. That doesn't mean he's succumbing. It doesn't mean that players are driving the Colorado mission. It does mean that he's flexible and he's generationally aware, and he understands that he's coaching different generations. If he went to the NFL, I think he would be very, sort of successful there in a mix of generations. So that it's that not having one way. I do think historically in football and in leadership, we all thought that there was one way to lead,
Yeah.
like the Jack Welch at GE, the Jack Welch style. That's not working nowadays. The third thing I wanted to mention is, and I think this is maybe the most important to me out of everything we've said, is putting the people first. So I have two examples in football, but I want everyone to extrapolate it to leadership in companies, in technology companies. The Buffalo Bills had someone who had a cardiac arrest a year or so ago, and I remember how the coach, I forget, I don't know his name, but the coach of the Bills put people, he went out on the field, he put people first, he put this person's life first. It wasn't about the game. In fact, I think they canceled that game. He and
Mhm.
the other coach canceled the game. That sent volumes to me, because there's football and there's the game and then there's human beings. And do I care about human beings first? And I know that may sound wishy-washy or sound really soft to a lot of you leaders, but we're not leading automatons. We're leading human beings, and we need to give them grace. We need to care for them. I think there was another one. Miami had the a guy who
Tua. Yeah.
had concussions,
Mhm.
and I remember I was watching some press conferences that his coach was giving, and every darn press conference he put the human first. He was like, he didn't talk about it had an impact to his team. He didn't talk about the impact to the team first. He talked about Tua. He talked about, I care about him as a person. I care about his recovery as a person. He never whined about, I'm going to try to get him to come back early. There was none of that talk. And so that's for leaders. I think we need to do a better job of realizing that people are our most important asset, and we need to, and it's not programmers or designers, it's the human being side. So care about their families, care about their context. If someone is depressed or going through a hard time, meet them where they are. So I think I saw that. I don't see that in every football team, but I saw some examples of that. John Harbaugh at Baltimore is one of those coaches. And again, I think the better coaches align with everything that we've said. Josh, last word.
Yeah, I agree with you very much in all those things. And my first position coach in college was John. And so he recruited me, and seeing him operate, everything we've talked about are things that he's done, and he's grown as a coach. And one of the things that going into the NFL is you're dealing with grown men, and that's a whole different layer of things. But I knew that John Harbaugh cared about me. When I played for him, I knew that it wasn't just lip service when he asked me how classes were going and how I was adjusting to being on campus or any of that, or when he talked to my parents. I knew that I mattered, and that made a difference. And so the same thing happens when you are a really great leader and you show that you're going to invest in your team, you're going to invest in these one-on-ones and really have it be a dialogue and a discussion, and someone feels what it's like to be cared about. And that's one of those things that is just consistently true. There are coaches, you know, Brian Kelly is one of those LSU that he is just always yelling at players. And I don't understand if they feel like he actually, like, to me, it's never been evident that he actually cares about players. It's about the game, winning the game, and if you can't help make that happen, then get out, which is true. I understand trust me, I understand it's true that you have to win the game, and if you can't be effective on the field, then somebody else will find a way to be more effective and you won't get to play. But the way that Brian Kelly chooses to handle that, that's not somebody I would ever want to play for. That's not someplace I would want to send my kid, because it's just, I don't view it as an effective leader, and I think that's why Brian Kelly will struggle wherever he goes. I think he'll go big places. He's done some good things. Was very effective at Cincinnati, but I was frustrated with him as a coach because when the team screwed up or someone made a bad play, that trust that we talked about, that was never there. It was just hammering the kid, and the kid was doing his best, right? He was doing everything he could. So now, to me, when I view a great leader, it's like, okay, cool. So we screwed up. Great. We talked about the most important play is the next play. How do I get you ready for that next play? It's not yelling and screaming at somebody. Like, I don't
No.
understand how that helps somebody get ready for that next play. I just don't. But there are coaches that are out there that still operate like that. And I don't see them being successful. And oh, guess what? LSU lost to Florida, who's a 500 football team. Surprise, surprise.
You know what's funny, Josh, and I know we need to close, but I watched a speech or a pitch by Brian Kelly maybe a couple weeks ago. He was in the locker room trying to get him ready for a game or something, and it was really like a God fearing, I don't respect him, and then I watched him on the sidelines occasionally, and I got the same impression. So, Metacasters, maybe we wrap up this way: look at sports and then reflect on yourself. For football sports is a really good mirror for leadership types. And then what I would say is ask yourself, what type of leader do you want to be? Do you want to be a Brian Kelly? Do you want to be a Jim Harbaugh? Who do you want to be? Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin? Do you want to be a Mike Tomlin? And again, they're not perfect, but there's some examples out there and counter examples. But I think you need to get your identity. And what we lean into is the principles that we've talked about today. And they've been successful for us, and I think they're successful. There's a benchmark out there for good leadership, and you have to make a choice.
Yeah, the thing that's great about sports is everything that Bob just said. It's all available in public. If you want to read about it, there's websites,
Yep.
or maybe you get the newspaper. If you want to watch it, there's plenty on YouTube or TV or whatever. So you have a window into good leaders and bad leaders. And so you look at teams that are consistently good. Watch those coaches, watch those leaders, listen to how they handle when things go well and when things go bad. Watch the teams that are struggling. The same thing. How are the leaders handling that? That's a window. That's an example of what good leadership can look like. And so then you can translate that and pull bits and pieces of, I'm not saying copy that, but there are bits and pieces that you can pull out of that and realize, oh yeah, I remember a time when something like that happened and ooh, I didn't handle it that very well. Okay, but let me go watch and see what somebody else did.
So we hope you enjoyed it, this seasonally timely episode, everyone. So
Yes.
from beautiful downtown Cary, North Carolina,
And beautiful downtown Fuquay Varina, North Carolina.
I'm Bob Galen.
And I'm Josh Anderson.
Jake,
And bake.
take care, y'all.
All right.